Hello and welcome back to the Double Swing with myself and Yumi. We've got another event to preview. It's been a little while since we've had one of these prestige events. We've had some smaller things with some big teams in attendance. So we've got some idea of how new rosters are looking and playing and some of those events going on right now. But we're going to be focusing on the Blast World Final, I believe it is. It's the big one. It's supposed to have all the best teams in the world, and of course, with the roster nonsense we've been going through, it's going to be quite difficult to really ascertain who that is. Welcome, of course, my co-host, Yumi. Have you been keeping up with all the goings-on around the scene, I guess?
About as much as you can be. You know, there's kind of between the Blast Full Finals and then like a whole bunch of these like online events. You know, I think G2 are currently in one of these CCT events and they lost to the Bad News Eagles, the Guild Eagles recently.
Yep, eliminated, yeah.
Yeah, which kind of happens, you know. I mean, that is kind of what you expect to see from online play, and as well, teams that are undergoing roster moves that don't always make the most sense. So there's definitely things to be interested about in the scene at the moment. Of course, there was recent news about Mouse, and they're another team that are coming into this event, into the World Finals. Yeah, everything's kind of all over the place. But I'm kind of looking forward to the end of this year because hopefully then the roster shenanigans come to an end because we're looking at the major and all the qualification routes for that. So,
yeah, by then everyone can lock in and start properly prepping, I think, because we're seeing chaos, seeing moves. Nothing's really settled in some cases. Some teams still looking to even have 5 players. Like, they don't have that currently sorted. So it'll be interesting. Thankfully, all the teams here actually have 5 players. It's just not the most convincing set in some cases, and it's not teams we're expecting to see long term. So we'll start with, I think, one of the more interesting picks. We'll do it in whatever order you feel like, Yumi, I guess, one of your picks. But yeah, open it up. Tell us where we're going first to try and figure out who's actually playing well.
Right, so I actually locked in for an underdog first because I felt like there were only a couple real candidates for favorites, and I went with an underdog in Cloud9. Now, this is not a team that I have a lot of confidence in terms of like winning trophies, but I do think they are probably one of the most stable looking teams in this event, which is kind of staggering to think about. Like if I was thinking about the top 4 or 5 teams at this event, Cloud9 are firmly in there, which is, you know, half of the pool. I think surprisingly, Boomich has been playing quite well on this Cloud9 roster, even though, you know, he's AWPing, as well as I still don't know if in-game leading duties have been transferred over to him or not. I've heard differing opinions about whether or not the transition for in-game leading has happened properly. Like, Hobbit is still offloading some of it, Electronic is still chiming in with stuff. Okay. So they're in a weird place, but I think weirdly Boomich is looking good. Axile looked better as well. I think during the full finals, if my brain is like just melded all of these events into one. Yeah. But between Thunderpick and the Blast Premier full finals, I think Axile's looking a little bit better. Electronic is, you know, playing just as well as he was when he was in-game leading as well. So I think this team is kind of a solid lock-in for won't struggle to get out of the group.
I've been really shocked, I think is the best way to put it, because I'm pretty sure the in-game leading duties are still being split up, divvied, which is something we knew in the past. They also had multiple voices on this roster, and the way they've made these replacements hasn't really changed that. You know, Electronic is formerly IGLing, was supposed to be IGLing, gave it off to Hobbit, who's not really an IGL, and now Boomich comes in, so there's no settled status on that, which I find strange, but it seemed to have been the Cloud9 undergroove sort of modus operandi for a long while now. Like, sure, we have an official listed IGL, but so many voices are going so much, it's dependent on our mid-rounds and our feelings that it doesn't seem as important to them to stress a set IGL, and apparently a set AWPer, because it is Boomich, and I guess, they have settled on that, but he's not an AWPer. The numbers bear it out. Most of the performances, he's had the occasional series, by the way, where he has just gone off on the AWP, but for the most part, he's not a great AWPer. The thing that's really been impressive, that's kept this roster functioning, clicking, turning, whirring, is Electronic. He's gone absolutely berserk. If you look at his numbers for the last month, I think he's averaging a 1.3 rating. Like, he's just gone absolutely nuts. So I still think this team actually has outclassed any expectations we could possibly have for a team that's muddled up a bit, doesn't really make much sense. Coming to an event with other teams who aren't going to be really sure of themselves. Yeah, Cloud9 is the obvious underdog pick, and honestly, I think a solid first overall pick for a draft of this nature, because if everyone else is unclear as to how they're going to proceed, and you've got the most, I think, time together of anyone, the most previous history together of anyone, pretty much, especially for the underdog picks, I think you've got a good chance of upsetting the cart here.
It's so odd to think that they've got like more time than anyone else when this is also a recent move, but it is true. Like I think one of the takes I had about Electronic and Perfecto coming into this roster was I thought they were in for like a massive culture shock. Like the way they did things in Na'Vi versus the way things were happening in Cloud9, I'm sure most people would have just gone, how are you a team? Like how are you guys competitive versus us when it feels like everything is far more like laissez-faire, on the fly, basically zero structure in comparison to Na'Vi. So by having Boomich, in some sense, there is someone that is like attuned to that style of play. Like he probably underwent a lot of individual tutelage with Blades, particularly because Boomich at one point was in game leading for that Na'Vi roster. Even though I do recall that simple interview where he was saying something along the lines of, "We have to get used to Boomich speaking." And which is definitely translation errors, but in terms of like calling a lot of like the overarching themes of rounds, it was probably Blade a lot of the time. So Boomich had to learn a lot. Yeah, it's weird that this team looks as good as they do right now. I don't know if that when these other rosters mature or find better stability, we'll be talking about Cloud9 in the same way because of that instability on the orb, or in game leading for that matter. But for now, they are. Yeah, I do feel very comfortable with this pick.
Yeah, it's a good one. I had to go, obviously, with a favourite pick, a lock-in. Arguably, on paper, the odds probably aren't the strongest for this favourite, even though they are ranked number 1 in the world. But I just think the recent change they've made is such an easy plug-and-play and just makes so much sense that I don't think it's going to affect them very much. FaZe Clan. Now, they just brought in Frozen to replace Twists, who we're pretty sure, like, they're not giving us the full roster announcement in one go, Liquid, but we're pretty sure he's ending up there. There's no real other rumour out there. So FaZe now have Frozen, and the last time we saw pretty much this exact move, a rifler taken out of Mouse Sports, put back with Carrigan, an IGL he's previously won events with, an IGL he's thrived under, it went pretty smoothly. It was an effortless transition, and I honestly believe it's going to be very much the same here. I think FaZe, they bring in a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh pair of hands, a player who's young and excited as well. Sure, you haven't changed that much in terms of your overall firepower, arguably, but you've just kept things going, kept things flowing. You're far more smooth and consistent than everyone else here. I think they're a very good pick to go all the way. Frozen's looked explosive, as ever, on Mouse Sports. If he brings that sort of consistent level into this FaZe Clan roster, yeah, they're just going to look absolutely unstoppable. So I've got FaZe winning it all. Controversially, maybe, considering they didn't win the last event that they attended. But I do think, yeah, the streak returns here. It comes alive again. Not necessarily they're going to go all the way to like some record-setting run, but yeah, they're going to go back into winning ways here.
Yeah, I mean, Frozen has been one of the top riflers this year. I mean, people kept saying Frozen for Rain, Frozen for Rain. Now, Frozen for Twist, like, you don't actually have to get rid of Rain.
No.
You never really did have to get rid of Rain. But if you were thinking about, like, min-maxing or trying to improve the roster, he always felt like the one that had the most inconsistency about him. Like, you just wanted 10% more in some games, and you sometimes only needed like maybe even 15% less in others. Like that variance didn't feel conducive to winning a lot. With Frozen, I do think there is a considerable amount of sort of role overlap. Like the way that Frozen has been playing is not the way that he used to play with Carrigan in MOUZ. Like before, he was a lot more like territory control, entry kind of player. He's now taken a little bit more of a back seat to that. And yeah, there's maybe a bit of overlap with Rops. in that respect, but I actually don't. I struggle to find much of a weakness in this move because Frozen is already shown to be a diverse enough player. I also think that him being under Shuei has allowed him to have more of a voice in the team because he was seen as the veteran on that roster, where before he was. I don't think he was taking a lot of leadership or ownership in rounds. Now I think he's probably developed that side of his game so much so that he actually can replace Twist's roles pretty easily, because it seems like everybody has like an idea or will offer up ideas and they'll be allowed to execute on them. So I think this is a really good test for Frozen. His ability to show his top caliber rifling and also relink with Karrigan. I do struggle to not be excited for this roster because I think Frozen to FaZe is such a slam dunk move.
Yeah, I think anyone just drawing parallels to Rob's has, I think, the same conclusion to draw. I do think, you can return to some other, I think, less passive sort of play, I guess you could call it, more pack play, more trader sort of roles, with some ease. It's not the end of the planet that he's going to be playing a slightly different way, so I'm going to be excited to watch it, first and foremost. It's going to be a fun little dynamic shift for them. And hopefully, yeah, as I said, I'm sure it will work out just fine. Something to now bring up is your favourite, who, yeah, I think statistically, the bookies, whatever you want to call it, on paper, should be the number one favourite in this event, shouldn't they?
Well, I mean, I bet on them the last event and it pulled through, so yeah. I decided, 2 times running, I'm hoping that they can do it again. Vitality, I've gone for. The Mezzi move, we talked about it on our last double swing where we were kind of discussing his implementation. It didn't actually seem to have many issues, and I think the bigger question mark we had going into the full finals was Flames, and he had an incredible finals. For me, seeing that level from Flames is very, very promising, because I think that might be the single best series I've seen from him since he joined the roster. And it happens while implementing a new player. Like, if you can get that at least 20% of the time, like, this is a championship winning team. Like, you've got a lot of depth in the roster in terms of fragging firepower. You've got players that are adept at sort of navigating the mid round. I love this Vitality roster, and also Apex as an in-game leader is proving to be more and more valuable as time has gone on. I think there was a period for, like, I think over the last couple of years, maybe in 2021, 2022, there was a real conversation to be had about, does he know what the end philosophy is? Like, especially when they were trying to implement the Danish duo, I think there was a lot of struggle in terms of, like, adopting the philosophies that Zonic was bringing to the table and also getting the French roster to work. So it feels like now they've kind of meshed out what they want to do in like how they want to design rounds, and I think that's all credit to Apex, who's done that. I mean, largely between coaches, but now with Xtaz as well behind them again, it's kind of more interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because Apex is a guy who's drawn a lot of flack. He's received a lot of criticism, and I think a part of that was during the French roster times. It was hard to escape the idea of there was 4 water carriers for 1 god, sort of thing, and then having to then truly become an IGL, speaking his second language, new coach, new system, completely new ideas. That must have been an incredibly difficult transition. So he deserves a lot of credit just for that. But more importantly, the first point you brought up, the point I want to just briefly touch on, is that Mezzi point. We said it should be fine when he becomes part of this roster. He should understand the roles fairly well. We know he can do a variety of things, and he has a really high skill ceiling. He can show off a lot of really potent fragging. But most importantly is how he fits. How he can be another cog in the machine, because he's not supposed to be one of the explosive top-line fraggers on this roster. And I think one of the most underrated parts of Mezzi's game has been really his comms and his serenity. I've never seen Mezzi look stressed I've never heard Mezzy give bad comms. Like in any POV demo, in any voice comm highlight, in any stream, I've never seen Mezzy give bad comms. And I think that's a really underrated part of being a top level pro. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. That realistically, he's able to be a level head who can bring the right sort of information, say the right things in the right moments, and just be a good team player. So I think massive credit to him for that. Awesome to see Flamesy step up, but also Spinks was spanking dudes left, right, and centre, and that's amazing to see. If he can keep that up, they've all of a sudden got like an actual trident rather than just a two-pronged pitcher of attacks, and that's incredibly difficult to deal with. If you've got the AWPer waking up to the AWP being the same and slamming people away, two riflers who are banging you out, and then everything else behind them is rock solid, this team should be a favourite for many, many events to come. And so, yeah, a fair pick. I just think they're going to lose that grand final. I've never seen... I don't think I might be going completely wrong here, but I don't think I've ever seen Vitality repeat events. Am I going crazy? Have they won back-to-back events with this core? Or even with the Danish core? Did they ever go back-to-back?
That is a good question.
Maybe at the major. Maybe just before the major they won an event. But
I think they did win an event just before Paris.
It might have been then. I might be going completely off the rails on that one. But I'm reaching. I want FaZe to win it, so I'm going to reach for everything.
Yeah, they won Rio. They won IEM Rio. Just before
not a real event. Okay,
Paris
cool.
Major.
I'm going to cope and seethe as much as I can. FaZe are going to win it. But no, great pick, honestly. Super solid. There's nothing much else to say about it. But let's discuss the complete opposite side of the spectrum. The least solid pick. Who the hell is left in the underdog section? I went trawling through it. It was rough, right? There's not much to pick from.
I'm honestly still surprised at who you ended up picking.
I went for the risky pick. But let's quickly do something else. Let's divert. Let's tangent quickly. One of the other favourites. There's two other favourites we didn't talk about. One of them I really want to hear your take on, because I've discussed it in other places. I've seen other people talk about it. Is ENCE with Glaive. Now this roster, there were rumours that the war parts would be cannibalised. It's come out that they won't be. Some pious is staying. That's the biggest one I heard leaked or rumoured that could potentially be leaving the team. Instead, we've ended up with Glaive and Cuban coming in as a coach. Are you buying into this? Do you think this can work long term?
I think it can work long term. Like, for me, this is the first roster in which Glaive doesn't have complete control. You know, for me, when I see star players or sort of big names on rosters slowly start to deteriorate, like I'm thinking players like Elige. I'm thinking who else? Who else is a good comparison to draw from here? Maybe I'm thinking like old simple Hellraisers or like Nico on Mouse. You know, when I see these players that have total confidence, total control over the roster, where it almost feels like anything they say will happen, I do lose faith in them a bit. And the only way for me to get sort of renewed confidence in their motivation, or that they're going to drive themselves further, is that they jump into a different roster. It's why Elige on Complexity for me is such like a baller move, because he has to prove his caliber and tenure on that roster again to these guys, when all the rumors were about how hard he was to work with, and you know the back end development issues. Like if Glaive wasn't able to make that previous Astralis roster work, yeah, there was some critique to be drawn. He probably wasn't innovating or having to design things as much as he was on Astralis's incredible run in the 2018, 2019. So now making use of a roster that has been world class with Snappy and trying to prove that he can make this roster still perform at that level, like for me, those are great targets to have if you're Glaive. And I think he'll be able to crack it, especially if this team doesn't get cannibalized. Like we don't see anything happen just before the winter period ends. I mean, these guys are still going to be a contender squad, because I just think, first off, Nerds and Sampias are exceptional, but then also like Diha can just have these excellent games. So I think they've got enough sort of staying power here. I don't know that I have much to say about like the Cuban angle, coming into this roster, but I've got some high confidence in Glaive.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it. The initial reaction was, or the first conversation I had about this was, why Cuban? But I thought, realistically, it just made sense to me eventually because, like, he's a guy who's been around the scene a long time, who's highly respected, worked with great teams, would probably know Glaive from behind the scenes stuff, in a fairly uncontentious way. So there probably isn't like bad blood between them from being previously in competition. Like, it's probably just an interesting voice for Glaive to have come with him. So that was the first conversation I had about it. But the second one is, can he prove that he can lead in the same way Snappy did? Because Snappy gets so much credit, and ENCE as an org gets so much credit for bringing in players who are fairly unknown. Kind of not necessarily down on their luck in terms of their performance, but in terms of the teams they're on, in terms of where they are in the scene, and build an absolutely insane roster out of it. A roster that could win events on a budget, shoestring budget. So Glaive now has to basically prove that he can take these sorts of same pieces and, with him being the primary voice, drive them to continued success. And I think he's got enough there. There's no asterisk that, like, there isn't enough talent in this team. There clearly is. You've got some Pites, you've got Nerds. Madden and D-Hard both have insane abilities to just go and win rounds when they need to. But they're also more than willing to be the workhorses of the roster. So I'm really interested to see how he performs on it. It's going to be a big test for him. But as you said, really importantly, a chance to prove himself. In the same way we saw Elige go and do it. It's a chance to really prove himself as still one of the top dogs, not a former top dog.
I think there's also a parallel maybe to be drawn about, when Glaive came into what was TSM into Astralis, like, this was, again, a team that was contending for titles, very frequently made it to playoffs, but then would struggle to close. That was mainly seen as like a choking issue or some sort of a mentality break that they had to overcome. That was then sort of cracked with Glaive, and I think they brought in a sports psychologist, and they did really try and tackle that kind of issue. Like, this is another team that is on the precipice of long-standing greatness in terms of like what the roster is able to achieve. It's just, it feels like the problem is different. Like, it felt like tactically sometimes ENCE shut down, or sometimes you'd get sort of less output out of Nerds, and how do you adapt to that? So for me, the challenges are different, but the scenario feels pretty similar for Glaive at least.
Yeah, and in that sense, I think it's part of the reason why neither one of us picked them as a favourite, because they don't have a sure thing set of players. Like, we have good things to say about them all, but it's not like we're looking at a for sure world-beating roster. All they need is to take that step from second to first, right? We're talking about a continued leap from a roster that should have been like top 6 to 8 to a roster contending for titles again. If Glaive could maintain that sort of overperformance, it'd be great. So yeah, that's kind of the ENCE conversation I want to have. Like, your thoughts on the big move that is bringing in Glaive, formerly Astralis' all-time great leader. But let's talk about my underdog, because I think I went kind of off the deep end looking at these rosters, and I went a bit insane trying to figure out which one I'd actually even want to win a game, because they all just made no sense to me. And yeah, I picked Heroic. Ranked 22nd in the world, starring such world beaters as, Prime Dupree, Zyphon, Salazar. I mean, Salazar, bro. Salazar's on this roster, and you don't even want to know who this Salazar guy is. But I essentially approached this from a storybook kind of frame of mind. I was like, if I'm writing the story of this event, who do I want to just be the plucky underdog that comes together, figures out a way, despite all the odds, to make a top 4? It's this roster, this Heroic roster. They have no right being there. It's kind of insane that they are. The way they've ended up here is somewhat tragic as well. In that sort of way, they form a pretty interesting hero's tale. Like, these guys are not supposed to be here. They have no right being here. They shouldn't be here. They should get massacred and sent straight home. But they have the hearts of lions. They have really, the soul of a champion, the soul of a hero. storybook hero, and I'm going to pick them because honestly, I've always thought Zyphon has been one of the more forgotten and neglected Danish talents, especially after that Covenant in Flames run where they don't really make any sort of deep runs or any close games happen without him pulling rabbits out of hats at left, right, and centre. Something he often got forgotten about. Everyone was so focused on Nikodos, Yabi, Roy. They didn't understand there was this one little anchor just cowering in corners making triple kills happen. And that was Zyphon. Tessis and Shush, we know how solid they are. Dupree has had a career rejuvenation. And then Salazar, yeah, that does bring some questions into play. Like this 19-year-old Orpa coming in. And I'm not even sure who's calling. But again, I believe, and that's what matters. It's about faith. It's a leap into faith, as some great philosopher probably said. I'm just forgetting which one. It's a leap into faith, and I have faith in this heroic roster to go top 4. No further. They get unceremoniously just dispatched of in the semis, but they're going to make top 4. Mark my words.
Okay. I mean, I don't share the vision. I do not share the vision at all. I've had many conversations with different people about Salazar because there was a real. It felt like there was a real spark in the Danish community about this Salazar kid, and people were like, "Oh, he's sick. Look at the numbers he's putting up." Blah blah blah. I've watched a few of his demos. I've been in an event where I've had to do analysis on him, and so I did actually watch him quite frivolously, and it was. I just don't see this. Like, I don't see much of a high ceiling for this guy. Like, he'll have like events where he'll just hit everything that's on his screen, but when he's thrown under a little bit of turmoil, I expect nothing, you know. And I very frequently didn't receive anything either. So, like, I don't think this is a long-term move for these guys. Obviously, it's just about filling out the roster. Also, even though Dupree has been good, it just. It's a lot.
Prime. It's the second prime.
It just feels like a lot. There's not a lot of positives I can draw from this roster at the moment. Like you said, there's who's calling. Tessis was already a bit inconsistent when he was with Heroic that were like very structured, and now what is Heroic? Where is the structure? The only constant you have at the moment is Shush and Dupree. So that's all I've got.
These guys are Danish, and so we all know about the Norns, the Weavers of the Fates, and they love to surprise. Keep the mortals guessing. And this would be the most unexpected run. I mean, come on. There's no way anyone's expecting them to do anything. They should go out dead last, they should just 0-2-0-2, and it should be a complete waste of a slot. And that's exactly why they're going to go top 4.
I think that's why I can't remember. I think it was either with you. I did another podcast, I think, on the full finals. And I think after our discussion, I did actually really believe that like Heroic were low key like a dark horse for that event, and they didn't place last. They definitely didn't place last.
No, they didn't place last. They beat Astralis, which is
the only win they needed, really.
The only, just rub it in just before they make the moves official. Yeah, let's be honest. I just didn't want to pick the other teams. I looked at them, and there's better cases, but they're such boring cases to make for them. We're going to talk about them briefly now, obviously. I think it just makes sense to go over them, because they are big names, and this is a small event. We're only a half hour into this, so we might as well talk about them. But there's just, how many times can I talk about Navi, and talk about Alexi B being, going to figure it out, he's going to figure it out. And we're in CS2 now, he's definitely going to figure it out. Well, he hasn't. He still hasn't. And the roster looks... I mean, I was excited for the Wonderful move because I've watched him for so long in Tier 2. I watched him on Spirit when they were, making the occasional event with him. I was really excited for what I'd get to see. And all in all, it all just felt a little bit flat. It felt a little bit flat. They lost to C9, they lost to Cole. And then... that was it. I think beating NIP was a given. in practice, in theory, before the event, I thought, hey, maybe we can
didn't you
weave...
pick them? I was going to say.
I wove a story for them as well. I'm far more interested in my underdogs being beautifully crafted stories than logical picks when all the picks are kind of ugly. I'd rather have the most interesting story to tell out of all the grim ones. And that was kind of what I went for there. They beat them, fair. But otherwise, they just look so flat, and I don't want to talk about another 5th to 6th team who just showed up, have roster issues, went home. That's kind of my logic for not picking them. I'm sure you have similar, I think, problems with this roster to have not picked them yourself. You went with Cloud9 for a good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I was very hopeful. The longer this draws out, the more concerned I am about Bit as a player. This is a guy that already was trying his best to learn English and adapt to having to call internationally, and now he has Wonderful with him. But I think it was a lot easier for him to look over his shoulder and think, okay, we are the last remnants of this Na'Vi roster. It's you and me, Simple. Oh, you're not playing anymore? What do you mean? What do you mean I'm the last guy? I just don't know that this guy has a support structure behind him. Everybody's wearing a lot of big smiles about the future, I'm sure. JL strikes me as a character that is always going to try and lift the spirits, especially amongst so many sort of young, sort of unproven players.
Yeah.
But it does feel a little like you've gone from maybe a little cold of an environment in Na'Vi to one that's almost too hot, and I'm worried about that sort of flash burn or whatever it is. I don't know enough about geothermal chemistry to really make that comparison, but I worry that it's a bit of whiplash for Bit in particular, because he went from being one of the top players of his rookie year to now being put in this position where I don't know what's expected of Bit in this roster. Do you want him to be another star when you've got JL doing a pretty good job? Immo was supposed to be the star, and now you bring in Wonderful as well. There's only so many frags to go around, and Bit feels a little depraved for me.
Yeah, I don't know where he's supposed to start. He was supposed to be the next Wonder Boy, the next big rifler for that region. And when he was in the Na'Vi lineup that was perfectly designed around all the strengths of the players, and he had really simple set roles that made sense for him, he thrived. He had his problems on the big stages where he wasn't quite as elite, but he was good enough in all the big matches they played. That was never the issue. In this roster, not only is he, yes, it's uncertain what his role really is, which player is supposed to be in the pecking order, if we're supposed to expect more from him, but that can be said for a lot of the guys. Ima hasn't looked like the number one rifler. You brought him in to be the electronic. He hasn't really looked that great at it. JL's supposed to be replacing Perfecto. Good fucking luck. I'm not sure how this is supposed to work out, so maybe they'll show us something a bit more convincing at this event. But so far I've been very uninterested in this Na'Vi roster, and I just couldn't bring myself to talk about them as a personal pick. That's just not how I see them really right now.
That. I think the bigger surprise was when you picked Heroic, not G2.
No. Okay, I've got some problems with this. I saw the Nexa move, and it was a coin flip. Either Nexa comes in as the IGL, and you're replacing Hooksy for someone else. Someone who can shoot. There's a few ideas that were sprinkled, rumoured. There was the unsubstantiated Madden rumour, which was a pure rumour. There was nothing behind it. There was ideas of if we are going to replace Hooksy, who can we do it with even right now? I thought Vladden was an alright idea, actually, because he stood in for Ents. He didn't look lost. He looked like he was part of the team, understood the system, understood how to play him, and made the most of it. So I thought that would have been an alright pickup as well, instead of Hooksy. But instead, we're looking at a roster which just gives me flashbacks to the G2 with Amanek and Jax, really. You're lacking firepower. If Hunter goes missing, you're lacking everything, really. Because Munacy has been up and down, and Nico hasn't been crazy. So if those two guys are not going to drag your kind of mixed bag of a roster to a win, I'm not sure what the hell is, because it's not going to be Hooksy's amazing leadership, because that has clearly not been the most important factor. He's very much the type of leader here who is letting things play out in the ways his stars feel comfortable, rather than dictating everything. He's not a big-time dictator in that sense. And then Nexa coming in to be a secondary caller / anchor. So you just added another guy who's going to talk and a worse anchor to the team in place of JKS. So you've just got more talking, less fragging. Why?
But I'm sure Nexa brings some great vibes. That's what you lost when you got rid of Jax and
the vibes,
and you got rid of Nexa as well. I don't know. That is actually like one of the few positives I can draw from this, because in their games so far, like Nexa's not a bad player. He's still going to be able to sort of hang, but he's also just noticeably worse than JKS. So I don't really understand the move, aside from maybe Nexa's more of like a. Like, if we're talking about, like, team chemistry behind the scenes, Nexa might be more of a positive influence. Like, JKS always kind of struck me as kind of, like, deadpan. Like, maybe he'll crack a joke here or there, but you'll struggle to get a considerable smile or a big, hearty laugh out of him. Those are minor things in the grand scheme of things, but team mentality can sometimes take a turn when you don't feel like your jokes are landing or people aren't engaged in your conversation. I get it. I don't think this is a team that we can, in confidence, look at and think this is a big part of some grand design. Like, Swanee doesn't strike me as a coach that is dictating how these roster moves are happening or why they should be happening.
Hasn't he stepped down just now as well?
He did. Yeah, he stepped down he's stepping down after the World Final.
Oh, okay, so this is his last event officially, right? Got it. Yeah.
So yeah, like if there's a big personality coach behind him, like if it's a Blade or if it's like I don't know, maybe Zonic, I don't know what's going on with this Falcons team, whatever. Like if you've got a big personality coach behind where I can at least appreciate or engage with their philosophy for what the future holds for the roster, I can maybe even try and spin a narrative like this. They're seeing something here I don't.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is not a whole lot of good, and I don't think that Swanee, for me, has increased my confidence in him enough that I can trust his vision either. And he's also stepping down. So
no, he clearly doesn't believe in this, because he's distancing himself pretty much immediately. He's moving on. So there's something else going on behind the scenes we're not really following. But until then, well, I have heard, Saw, the Ents coach, I thought maybe when I saw Swanee step down, Saw might be going over there. But I've also heard it's probably not G2 that he's going to end up with, so that's a whole blank space. I also heard Matisse the Fnatic wasn't going to happen. So it could be that that's the next logical progression for Saw.
I mean, I did think if you were going to bring an in-game leader in and Snappy was, still kind of in flux about like this Falcons team isn't what it was cracked up to be, and him and Saw have both left. Like, could be...
and neither him nor Magus is officialized yet. Yeah. So there's still stuff to work out or to do before that gets announced. So potentially there's still movement. So we have to wait. We have to keep waiting. I think Falcons really aren't too bothered about this Copenhagen major. I think that's basically the conclusion I have, is the Copenhagen isn't their target, which is weird to me because I just think it should be. But
I think it probably was, but when these deals fall through, you just have to kind of extend your timeline, right? So.
Yeah, I guess that's a big influence on it. So,
the only team we've not spoken on is the one that Frozen's leaving.
Yeah, Mouse Sports. I was about to say, we've got to bring those up quickly. They are playing with a stand-in, officially listed stand-in. We'll see how that ends up going. A bit of a weird one. I wasn't expecting... Firstly, the Frozen move coming through. It wasn't a complete shock. It was just... I didn't expect this sort of immediate turnaround on everything. I expected a little more delay. I thought this event would be played with rosters as they stood. But Mouse bringing in Brolan is just a bit odd. I wasn't expecting that at all. I thought they may promote someone, they may go digging through the scene, they might pull out, a name we weren't expecting out of the hat. But I guess Brolan does count as that, but I was expecting someone, coming from deeper down, more of a reach. He's been just horrendous on NIP because NIP well, first he's been benched for a while, but when he has been playing, his role has made no sense. He's looked completely uncomfortable. He's bounced around the scene trying to speak Swedish briefly, but then it turns out that wasn't the real issue, that was overblown. He's just not comfortable in any of the roles he's finding. And so it's been a terrible, terrible 18 months for Broland professionally. Doesn't bring much confidence, hence why I think we both didn't pick them. Because Mousesports have been a good team. It's just, if this is the guy you're bringing to replace Frozen, at least even temporarily, yeah, probably give him a miss on this event. Let them figure it out later. This is not the event to start picking Mousesports.
Yeah, I think the well, Shui actually did like an initial TV confirmed, I think. So I was sort of darting through some of that where he talks about it, and Shui's always strikes me as an in-game leader that's always very positive or tries to draw a very positive outlook from everything. Just kind of goes with the idea of this. Like, there are some in-game leaders that are going to try and move stuff around or like have you slot in, but what's probably going to happen is that like responsibilities are going to be shifted about to try and compensate for the lack of Frozen. And so I think in some sense Broland will be given the opportunity to have those roles that he wants, especially on T sides, because they're going to need that kind of stopping power if you want this roster to look even a fraction of its former self. So for me, I mean, I don't hate the Broland move. I do think though that the more rosters he joins or the more chances he'll get, like when we see where Mouse currently are in like the world landscape, if you see Broland in this roster for, I don't know, 3 months, I don't know if that's even going to happen. It's probably just going to be this one-off event.
Yeah.
But if you don't get high output out of him within like 2 or 3 events, then Broland's stock just drops and he goes probably back to the Swedish scene and tries to build something new, which I think could be probably healthy for him to a certain degree, because he kind of just found himself at the top level of CS with Fnatic being like his first roster and then just staying there. And that's not that. I don't think every player is going to experience that in a very positive outlook. Like Frozen is the parallel, weirdly, but Frozen has developed under a lot of very stable leadership, where I feel like for Broland that's never been the case. Like Fnatic never really had like clear leadership structure. NIP, it felt like there wasn't proper leadership there either. So I'm kind of interested to see how he works under Shui.
Yeah, perhaps it's the kick in the arse he's needed, this sort of shift away. But I'm not convinced. I'm not sold. I think he's going to struggle. I think the team overall is just not going to look as sharp as they did before. So all the best for them long term. If this ends up being their full-time move as well, maybe they can figure it out, because he's clearly got talent. We've seen him in the past be a very explosive, high-impact player. If he can bring it back, that'd be lovely. But for now, there's not much to rely on in that sense. Perhaps he's just going to mid out. Instead of bossing out, just mid out.
Yeah. Is he just a Krieg fraud?
Is he just a Krieg fraud? That one patch where he was the god, yeah.
Yeah.
Potentially that narrative comes true. Just bring back the Krieg. That's the real solution.
It might even still be true. I don't know. Like I don't want that to be like I hate the idea of a player being so good in one meta and then just terrible the next, when really the baseline mechanics of what made him good during that meta actually haven't gone anywhere. It's just just for some reason his output decreases. So
yeah, for whatever reason it didn't work out. It's been rough for him. Obviously, it'd be nice if it did. Just he figured it out. But there's so many. The weird thing is the Swedish scene. If you're going to take a gamble on a player from Metisport. Take a gamble on some other guys from the young ninjas to come in and fill some slots. I'm not sure you want to go down the Broland route again. So it'll be rough to see options for him in the future. I'm not sure what the actual answer will be. But hopefully we see some life from him, even if we don't believe the team's going to do much. If he can show off, like a 1.1 rating on a losing team, being a rifler, taking a lot of entries, maybe that'll be good for him. Maybe that'll be good for his stock, especially. But alright, that's all the teams. It's going to be an odd event. Hopefully a good one. But in terms of the points, this is an interesting thing. We didn't bring it up before we started talking Turkey. But last event, both of our favourites were good picks. It's just yours was better. Yours won the event, mine didn't. So 2 points for you, 1 point for me. Puts you on 24, me on 27. And the viewers got both their picks. They got FaZe the favourite, made the final, there's a point. Or, yeah, just 1 point, didn't win the event. And then Cloud9, their underdog, because they actually made an impressive enough run, got a point. They end up with 2 points. So the viewers, you lot are winning. Just take the dub. I don't think we're going to catch you up in time. There's not enough events left in the year. So, yeah, good job, you lot.
Is there even a way that I can overtake before the end of the year? I don't think there is. Then.
I mean, there's only 3 points between us. If both your picks are good and both my picks are bad, that's it.
Right, I see. Okay.
You can make 3 points quite easily in this event, and I can make 0 easily if my picks are as terrible as you believe. The only difference being, well, we both picked 2 teams from the same group, unintentionally, so we've increased our chances in that sort of way. Like if my underdog
get out, that's good, yeah.
Yeah, if my underdog makes it out the group in first place, which I'm sure no one believes in, that's immediately a point right there. But, more realistically, yeah, you have a chance to get in 3, I have a chance to get in 0, so
okay.
It could all switch right on this. And if we draw at the end of the year, I don't know, we'll 1v1 on Rust or something. We'll figure out a way to decide.
Or we'll go 50-50.
Or we'll go 50-50, yeah. Yeah, we could double the money, but...
Or that, yeah.
It remains to be seen. I'm sure I'll have a little vote somewhere to decide what actually goes down, but alright. Thanks again for joining me. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad my voice held up this time, because last time I was a bit rusty, a bit out of practice, and just fell apart at the end, but today we were good. And yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts on any of these teams, any of these players we've already dived into. I'm always curious to find out what other people think. And alright, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.